Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's lesson is on add fractions with unlike denominators using a number line from SWUN 5-7 and 5-8. So our goal for tonight's lesson is I will learn to add fractions with unlike denominators using a number line. Our vocabulary for today is common denominator, fractions with the same denominator. So for example, 3/4 and 2/4 have the same denominator. They both have the denominator of 4. Unlike denominator, fractions with different denominators. Different denominators. For example, 3/4 and 2/3 have different denominators. Simplest form is a fraction's numerator and denominator have only 1 as a common factor, or they have a GCF, the greatest common factor, equal to 1. So our steps for tonight's lesson is we're going to first estimate, then we're going to plot or graph fractions on a number line. Then we're going to find the common denominators. So the fractions that have the same denominators on the number line. Our next step is going to be adding the fractions. And lastly, we're going to simplify. And my first step says to estimate. So I'm going to estimate 1/2, which I'm just going to leave it as 1/2. I'm going to write estimate on the side. So 1/2 plus 2/3. If I remember, 2/3, that looks about half to me, so I'm going to say 1/2. So 1/2 plus 1/2 is approximately 1. My next step is I'm going to plot the fractions on a number line. So I'm going to start with 0, and my number is 1/2. When I'm plotting my fractions, I'm going to make sure that when I'm for my estimate, that I'm going to include enough space for my solution of 1. So I'm just going to include enough space to have a solution of 1, or maybe even a little bit more than 1. So I'm going to go to 2. So I'm going to split up my number line into 1/2. So I'm only doing a number line for the first add-in, which is a half. So I know half is in between 0 and 1. So my denominator tells me how many parts my whole is being broken up into. So if it's 2, I need to have 2 parts. 1, 2. And a trick that I have is I always make 1 less than my denominator. I make a 1 less tick mark. So my denominator is 2, so I'm only going to make 1 tick mark. And then I'm just going to shade my half. So I'm going to use 2 different color highlighters to make my plots for my first add-in and my second add-in. So I'm going to make another number line with 2/3, and I'm going to use another color for that one. So I'm going to do 0, 1, and I'm going to do 2 again. And this time I have 3 in my denominator, so I need to break this number line into thirds. Just like my trick, I'm going to look what's 1 less than 3. There's 2, so I'm going to make 2 tick marks. And if I double check here, I have 1 part, 2 part, 3 parts. And if it helps you, I'm going to shade that in with a different color first. So that's 2/3. But I'm going to also make those tick marks over on the other side as well. If it helps, here's a trick. 2/3 is up here. I'm just going to show you how that box looks on a number line as well. So if you look here, I have my tick marks on the number line, but I'm just going to continue them and make a shape, my rectangle, just like I had for my hole. And I'm going to take my highlighter and highlight that whole box. So if you're confused with number lines, you can always draw, extend your tick marks, and make a rectangular shape and shade it in, and it will be the same as our diagrams that we were doing before. So my second step said to plot fractions on a number line. My third step says find the common denominators of the number line. So now I need to divide each number line by the denominator of the other number line. So if I look at my first number line, I have it in halves, and my second number line's in thirds. So I look at the other denominator, I have thirds. So I'm going to take my one section, only one section, and I'm going to divide that into thirds. So I need to put 2 tally marks. So that's into thirds now. So that one section's in thirds. So now I need to do that to the other sections. I need to make it into thirds for the whole number line. Okay? So now I can count to see how many parts for my one whole. Be careful, if you extended past one whole, make sure to stop, because when you're counting your denominator, you're only going for one whole. This would be for 2 wholes, so be very careful. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts to make one whole. So my denominator would be 6. And how many parts did I shade in for 1/2? 1, 2, 3. So 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2. So just like we did for the first number line, we're going to do it to the second number line. So my first number line that I had 1/2. So I have to make these thirds into halves now. I have to split it up, and I'm only going to use 1 tally mark to split that in half. So I'm going to make 1 tally mark in every piece. And now our denominator should be the same. So let's double check from 0 to 1 that we have a denominator of 6 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. So our denominator is 6, and our numerator is how many parts do we have shaded in, or up until what part on our number line is shaded. So 1 part, 2 part, 3 part, 4 parts. So 4/6 is equivalent to 2/3. Okay? So our common denominator for both of our number lines is a 6. So we have 6 as our common denominator. To add our fractions. But before we do that, I'm going to look at my 2 number lines, and I'm going to see I have 4/6 and I have 3/6. So I'm only going to choose one number line, so I'm going to start with my first number line. And I'm going to take these 4/6, my orange 4/6, and I'm going to add it to my yellow number line. So I'm just going to count out 4/6. 1, 2, 3, 4/6. When I'm doing that, I'm actually adding the 2 fractions together. And now I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When I add them together, I have 7, 6, or I can look here, or 1 and 1 6. Okay, so that's how much I have when I add them together. So now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to add my 2. I have 3, 6. My yellow number line was 3, 6 plus 4, 6. They have the same denominator, so I can go ahead and add them. So I have 6, the denominator stays the same, and I can add the numerators. 3 plus 4 is 7. And now my last step after adding is to simplify. So I'm going to simplify 7 6. So I have in and out, 7 divided by 6. 6 goes into 7 one time. 1 times 6 is 6. 7 minus 6 is 1, and I have 1 6, which equals to 1 and 1 6. So that is our answer, and we double check it with our number line when we moved the other number line up to our first number line. Did we get the same answer? Yes. Now, my last thing that I want you to do is to check, is 1 and 1 6 close to your original estimate of 1? It is. So we're done with that problem. I'm going to estimate that to 1, and I'm going to estimate 1/3 to 0. And that is, when I add that up, it's going to be 1. My second step says to plot. So again, make sure there's enough space to find the solution on the number line. So I'm going to draw my number line, and I'm going to divide it into 4 equal parts because my denominator says 4. And remember my trick, I can do 1 less than 4 tally marks. 1, 2, 3 tally marks. 1's less than 4 because if I count them, I have 1. Right here's 1. Here's 2 parts, 3 parts. We have 4 parts. Okay, and then I'm going to take my highlighter and I'm going to highlight 3/4. Oops, I went a little bit past. So only to that number line. Okay, and now I'm going to draw my second number line. And this time I have thirds. So again, make sure that there's enough space for our solution of 1. So my trick is 1 less than 3 for my tally marks, or my tick marks. So that's 2 tick marks, and that makes 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts for our denominator. And I'm only going to highlight 1/3. And I need to label. So I have 3/4. And I have 1/3. So now I need to find the common denominator. So I'm going to look at my first number line, and I have it into fourths. But I look at the other number line's denominator, which is thirds, and I need to separate each part into, now I need to divide it into thirds. So I'm going to put 2 tally marks to split each space into thirds. And I'm going to do the same thing on my second number line, and I just realized I used my trick and I make 3 tally marks. I'm going to make 3 tally marks again in between all my spaces. Oh. Okay, so now if we count how many pieces is it broken up into now? So we're going to find the denominator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's broken up into 12 pieces. And what is my numerator? So we found our denominator. What's my numerator? And if that was confusing how to get to 12, I'm going to do my trick of extending my box and making it into the rectangular shape to find my thirds. So I have my tick marks on my number line. I'm just going to extend those to make it into a shape so that it's easier for me to figure out how many are in my numerator. So I have 1 shaded in, and I passed it when I highlighted it, so let's not count that one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is in my numerator. So up until 3/4, I have 9. Okay? And I'm going to do the same thing for 1/3 number line. And I'm going to just go ahead and make that shape right away. It helps me. So wherever you see a tick mark, you draw a line. Okay, so let's count. How many parts do I have for my whole? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So my denominator is 12. And how many did I have shaded in? 1, 2, 3, 4. So my numerator is 4 and my denominator is 12. So we plotted. We found the common denominator. Our common denominator, both lines have 12. Now we can add the fractions. So I'm going to come over here and do 9/12 plus 4/12. When I add that together, my denominators are now the same, so I can keep my denominator and I just add the numerators. 9 plus 4 is 13. So I'm going to actually come over here and add 12ths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's just 1/12 past the whole number is 1. So it's 1 and 1/12. Okay, so we've added them. And the last one says to simplify, which we looked at our number line to simplify. We can also simplify using in and out. 12 goes into 13 one time. 1 times 12 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1, and we get 1 and 1/12 as well. Now, last step is to double check 1 and 1/12. Is that close to 1? Yes, that is. So now we're done. Okay. My next problem, my first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to read it. So 1 2/3 of the chocolate candies in a bag are yellow and 1 1/2 are green. What fraction of all the chocolate candies are yellow or green? So now I'm going to write my expression. 1 2/3 plus 1 1/2. So I have my expression, and my first step is to estimate. So I'm actually going to fold this so I can see my steps easier. So I'm going to estimate. So I'm going to say this is close to 1 1/2 plus 1 1/2, which is about, that's my about sign, which is about 3. Okay, my next step says to plot them on a number line. So I'm going to make my number line and make sure that you have enough space for your estimate. So 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3. and I come up here, and I'm only worrying about my denominator to find out how many parts I'm breaking it up into. And it's 3. I'm going to use my trick, go 1 less to make my tally marks. So I'm going to make 2 tally marks in between all my whole numbers to split it into thirds. So I have 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts to make a whole. So now I'm going to take my yellow highlighter and I'm going to shade 1. Here's my 1, and now I need to make 2 thirds. So 1/3, 2 thirds. Okay, so that's 1 and 2 thirds. My next step is to make my next number line. And this time it's breaking it into halves, so I know I only need to make 1 tally mark to make 1 part, 2 parts for my denominator of 2. So I go ahead and make my other ones. And now I'm going to take my orange highlighter and I'm going to highlight 1 1/2. So I have 1 1/2. Okay, so now that I have them plotted, my next step says find the common denominators on the number line. So I look at my first number line and I look to the denominator of the other one, which is a 2. So I need to split these into halves. Each portion needs to be split into half. So I'm just looking at that one, that 1/3, and I'm going to split that 1/3 in half. So I'm just going to divide it, and I'm going to do that to all my other thirds. Okay? Now I'm going to do the same thing on my other number line. I'm going to look at the first add-in, which was 1 2 thirds, and it's into thirds, so I need to break my halves into thirds. So I'm going to add 2 tally marks because I have 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, and I'm going to do that for all my other parts on the number line. Okay, so now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to count to see how many parts are in my whole. And this part, I want you to make a big line at the number 1. Just a big tally mark at the number 1 so that you don't get confused and keep counting past that because it's highlighted. So let's count how many parts to make one whole. 1 part, 2 parts, and I'm actually going to make a box. Let's start over. I'm going to make the box. 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, 5 parts, 6 parts. So to make a whole is 6 parts. That's my denominator, but I'm going to have more parts in my numerator. So I have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts in my numerator. So I have 10/6, which is equal to 1 2 thirds. Okay? Now we're going to count, same thing, let's make our box right away, our rectangle. Let's see how many parts does it take to make up to one whole. 1 part, 2 part, 3 part, 4 part, 5 part, 6 parts. So my denominator's now the same. It's 6, but I have more than 6, so I'm going to keep counting. 7, 8, 9. I have 9 in my numerator. Okay, so now our denominators are the same, so we found the common denominator. Now I have to add the fractions. So I'm going to write 10/6 plus 9/6 equals to 19/6. I can add right away because the denominators are the same, so I keep the same denominator and I just add my numerators, which equals 19. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take my orange highlighter and I'm going to add my 9/6 to this number line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I actually need to make one more little tick mark because we're past 3. 9. Okay? So if I'm looking at my number line, I can see that that's 3 and 1 6. Okay, and I'm going to double check because my last step is to simplify. So I'm going to take 19/6 and I'm going to simplify in and out. 19/6. 6 goes into 19 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. 19 minus 18 is 1. I bring my 1 up from my numerator. 6 is my denominator, and I get the same answer. Last step is to check. Is 3 6 close to my estimate? Yep, it's close. So we're done now. So tonight you have 2 problems for homework. You have 1 3/4 plus 2 2/3, and you have a word problem. On Saturday, Nate ate 1/2 of a pizza for lunch. On Sunday, he ate 1/3 of the pizza. How much of the pizza did Nate eat on Saturday and Sunday? First, set up your problem. What are you adding together? Then you're going to follow your steps and come up with your solution. We will practice this more tomorrow. Please don't forget to rate yourself at the bottom. My understanding of this lesson is a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Have a nice night.